And people who are losing things and with no memory of where they've been can't retrace their steps. So we get people turning up to memory clinic in a bit of a fluster sometimes saying, oh, we couldn't find mum's handbag, because it's sort of this general search and she's put it down and she can't remember where she's been to look for it. Adjusting to changes in routine, and that's where mum might come and stay with the daughter, and for the first time they realise that she's not really coping at all, because in her own routine at home where nothing changes, no one notices. Out of that routine, suddenly the holes in the memory and thinking are apparent. Recalling recent events is a pretty obvious one, but people often bluff. So what did you do yesterday? Oh, nothing much. Oh, this and that. Or look to family for the answer. Following, so I'm using the usual excuses that people, which might be valid, but it's worth looking behind it. Following a storyline, the clue for that is I used to read but I don't bother, or I used to watch TV but there's nothing much on now, and there probably isn't, but they might just not be able to really remember and follow it, so they don't bother anymore. And again, not all of these might be present, but they're just sort of little warning signs. Following conversations, especially in a large group. Getting lost. I had a man who came in and said, I've lived in Bendigo for 20 years. I knew there was a problem when I was going home the other day and I passed the fountain 3 times. He just got completely bamboozled. Reduced ability to manage money and finances. Social withdrawal is a common one. I don't go to senior sits anymore because all they do down there is gossip. Often people will withdraw because they're afraid of forgetting people's names and afraid of not being able to keep up with the conversation. And so they tend to it's easier just to stay at home in that safety. Visuospatial abilities are a big one, especially when it comes to driving. So that's interpretation of the visual environment. And we have, as part of our testing, we have pictures for people to name. And sometimes it's amazing what people have trouble interpreting. There's a picture of one of the tests we use with a whistle, and someone said it was a piece of fruit. Just couldn't work out what it was at all. And a complex environment can be difficult for people to interpret. So you might find people are having little accidents and things because not being able to work out which lane they're supposed to be in, or how to cope with roadworks and things like that. So reduced visuospatial abilities is a big problem when it comes to driving. And reduced ability to complete familiar tasks. A gentleman came in and said, I've been hooking the trailer up for years and now I couldn't remember how to do it. And mum used to be able to bake a sponge cake. Now she's leaving things out, can't remember how to do it. She's done it hundreds of times. Speech and language problems, especially word finding. Sometimes people are creative, and the speech pathologist in the room would have lots of examples, but one of my favourites was a lady who was I asked her what her job was that she used to do, and she said she worked with those machines where the words come out, and she meant a typewriter. I thought that was great. So if you've picked up that you think that there could be some memory issues that warrant further investigation from talking to a client or family, you can refer. There's a couple of ways. If you think that it'll be followed up, and you might suggest to the family or client talk to their GP about a referral to memory clinic just to investigate it, because the GP will then arrange a CT and blood test to exclude other factors. And you can do an internal referral, and then we contact the GP to get those things done. So that you know what to tell your clients what will happen is when they come in, we ask them to bring a key informant, so it can be son, daughter, husband, wife, good friend, whatever, someone who knows them well, and we split up. So the social worker speaks to the key informant to get that sort of their perspective on how the person's cognition is. And I do a lot of the assessment, and some other clinicians, of the person, and what we do is get their perspective on their memory problems. Sometimes they have good insight and sometimes not, and usually the more they talk about it, the less likely it is they've got dementia. The less they say about it, like, oh, I'm pretty fine, my daughter made me come, they're probably more likely to have the dementia. And we it's good to get both, because we might ask, so how are you going with the cooking? And the person might say, oh, fine, I'm cooking really well. And the key informant's saying they haven't cooked for 12 months, Dad's taken over, that kind of thing. And we also do some screening assessments, including the mini-mental, the ACE-R, the MOCA, and the geriatric depression scale. Or if it's a younger person or there's anxiety issues, we do the DAS, which picks up on anxiety and stress, just so you know the range of tests that we use. After that, they come back for a medical appointment, and the medical appointment is with one of the specialists. We've got a psychiatrist and geriatrician as part of the medical specialists. And if there's a flavour of more depression, anxiety kind of influence, we try and steer them towards a psychiatrist, and if it's more general, it's the geriatrician. And they will pull together all that information. They'll look at the CT, they'll look at what the key informant said, how the testing was, so they don't make a judgment just on one thing, because someone can perform really well on testing but not be functioning well, or like more often vice versa, they do poorly on testing but are actually managing okay. So it's important to look at the whole picture. And I'll talk to you about some of the outcomes later. Now driving is probably the one that causes the most problem. I've had a man who came in, and I kid you not, his first line was, if you take away my licence, I will kill myself. So good, no pressure. But the truth is, if someone has the capacity or the capability of driving, they can continue to drive. But it is a medico-legal responsibility to report to Vic Roads if you get a diagnosis. So there's a few, but having said that, we try and handle it in as sensitive way as we can. So there is a driving in your health document that on the Austroads website. So it talks about the family, the person's responsibility. And sometimes families say, we'll handle it. What we're actually doing is we're making it less and less necessary for Dad to drive. So he thinks he's still got a licence, but in actual fact, we're onto it. When he's got an appointment, we always make an excuse to pick him up for it, and he actually never drives, and we'll just let it gradually dwindle away. And that's kind of a kind thing to do, but you have to be a pretty involved family to do it like that. Sometimes Grandma donates the car to the granddaughter at uni to borrow it. And if someone's memory is really bad, you can do the cars being fixed, but that's a bit of a long bow. But occasionally people lose track of time. But the other thing is the Vic Road. We're happy at Memory Clinic to be the bad guys. So, because sometimes families come in saying, I really want them to stop driving. They're really keen for their licence to go. And we're happy to do the Vic Roads form, and what happens is this is filled out, sent to the Vic Roads Medical Review Board. They will then send a letter back to the client to say you will need to do an OT driving assessment, and that's an off-road, on-road, and often they don't pass. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they get a restricted licence, but even that's problematic. This morning I was doing an information session, and a daughter of a client said, Mum did a driving assessment last week. She's told that she's allowed to drive to Strath Village and home, but she's forgotten. So she gets in the car, she forgets that that's what she has to do. So it's driving is problematic, but we have to weigh up our responsibility to the community as well as the person's right, and also we have to consider lack of insight. And I'm hoping that in future that there might be better education from when people get their licences at 18 to say, driving is something you won't do all your life. You will stop at some point, and to really start to educate people to be planning for not driving, not assume they will be driving forever. But that's another story. But so driving will be addressed, but it won't necessarily, license won't necessarily be taken away. I'll put into a home. No, that's not our job. Our job is to try and keep you at home. And sticking your head in the sand, just not coming to Memory Clinic doesn't mean the dementia won't happen. And also you won't necessarily get a diagnosis of dementia. There's nothing that can be done. Even some GPs unfortunately think that. But there are some medications called cholinesterase inhibitor, which can buy some time. They allow more neurotransmitter in the brain, so that the brain that is left can work better. And people report people are more engaged and brighter. So it does work for some people and buys some time. There's lots of education out there and lots of information, and this is the bit that you could take away to think about for people who already might have a diagnosis. There are about 70 help sheets like this on the Alzheimer's website, including things like how to go on a holiday with someone with dementia, how to set up the home environment, about driving and dementia, about just carer stress. There's heaps, and they're all on the website and just can be downloaded. And there's even stuff that you mightn't realise that there's this one on Lewy body disease, because you might be working with someone with Parkinson's disease, which comes under that barrier, that whole umbrella of Lewy body disease, and it's got a heap of good information about the cognitive change that might happen. So there's lots of that, and there's also Alzheimer's Australia are very good in going into people's homes and working with them where they're at to provide more education as needed. And so the referral could be done to Alzheimer's Australia, or they can refer themselves. And it's not only for people with Alzheimer's, it's for people with other kinds of dementias too. So there is a lot that can be done. So it is definitely worth people coming. So there are possible outcomes. The possible outcomes are diagnosis and education, as I've mentioned. Sometimes there's not enough evidence for a dementia. So people have got some impairment, but it's not looking like a dementia as yet. But a certain proportion of people go on to develop dementia after being diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, but some don't. So we review them again in 12 months, compare the test results and see. Some people, have some people who we discharge after that saying, look, it seems to be stable, you can get another referral if you need. And some people have progressed. Some people are worried, well, they come in and there's actually nothing wrong with their memory at all, they just think there is. And so I remember one lady came in and she was really worried because she'd been down having drinks with her friends and she couldn't remember the drink that went with what you put with gin. And I couldn't remember that it was tonic water. And she was really worried about that. So sometimes people leave reassured that they're actually quite fine. And sometimes we don't know what's going on, but we know there's something going on, we don't know what, so we will get an MRI done or a neuropsych to look in more depth. So there's lots, so that's why you can encourage people to come, because it could be a whole lot of different outcomes. And this is telling you probably what you already know, but just to think about, if someone has rapid forgetting, they're obviously not going to remember the exercises or whatever that you're wanting to do. So you need to think about what you want to achieve and focus on safety and function. You're not going to get the optimal, perhaps, rehab outcomes, but you want to think what's going to be the most useful to help this person be safe and continue to function. It's worth checking if someone's managing their medication okay. If they're not taking their heart tablets and things, they're going to be generally unwell. So, but just to check how they're going with those things, keeping it simple. Talk to family and other people about what strategies work best. How are we going to get Dad to remember to use his wheelie frame? What do you reckon will work? Is it worth saying let him furniture walk in his lounge room but he uses it out? Just figure out what will actually work, and use familiar activities and get the family members on board, as I said earlier, to help with that. I think that was it. I think that was